Good evening, and we come on the air at this hour because we are following developments out of Manchester, England. Reports of an explosion at an Ariana Grande concert at the Manchester Arena there, one of the largest
Nye sections globalization into 4 dimensions: economic, military, environmental, and social. When there's a dispute of ideology or method from 2 differing nations or cultures, the communication between these nations is compromised. The Manchester bombing in the parking lot after an Ariana Grande concert is a prime example of this. It comes as no surprise that the attack was executed during a glamorized female pop singer show, where the audience was heavily female-dominated, especially when one understands that this act was carried out by a terrorist sympathizer whose values and beliefs towards human rights, individual freedoms, to religion often differ drastically. The spread of ideas between nations has the potential to be very enriching to all parties involved. Unfortunately, the spread of toxic and ill-formed rhetoric can just as easily be spread, causing catastrophizing events on innocent civilians.
Iraqi troops danced in the streets of Mosul as they celebrated an impending victory over the Islamic State group 8 months after they launched their operation to take back the city.
The world cannot easily be flattened due to new advancements with technology, accelerating and broadening communications between nations. However, with communication, there's more often than not conflict. This is the most evident in the communications between the United States and ISIS, demonstrating a global conversation that have put civilians at risk in nations all over the world. An us versus them rhetoric has been established.
Last few hundred jihadists from the city.
The IS group are completely irrational. They've had heavy losses, but they just keep fighting. The world hasn't seen anything like this.
Much of Mosul's historic old city has been reduced to rubble as a result of fighting on the ground and in the air. The US-led coalition
in Orlando, a massacre at a gay nightclub right here behind me. You can see the sign, it's black and white, just over my shoulder here. And at the center of it all, a lone gunman who, in the middle of that massacre, called 911 to pledge allegiance to ISIS.
In Barber's Jihad versus McWorld, he extends an optimistic yet grounded perspective on the conflict between preserving tribalism and progression towards modernity. Barber sees indigenous culture becoming lost to pop consumerism in a bloody battle for predominance. In an example like the Orlando shooting, we see all 3 elements: ISIS-affiliated terrorism, capitalistic consumption, and a strive towards freedom and equality. Omar Mir Sadiq Mateen, the shooter, has chosen the path of jihad, while the club members had chosen McWorld. Neither can really be blamed. However, as Barber predicts, the forces of jihad, noisier and more obviously nihilistic than those of McWorld, are likely to dominate the near future, etching small stories of local tragedy and regional genocide on the face of our times.
The death toll rising from that deadly attack in London. A single attacker using a car as his weapon, mowing down people on a bridge to the British Parliament. People running for their lives. You see it here.
The attack that occurred in London at the Westminster Bridge was an act of pure terrorism. If Hans Kung himself were to analyze this event, he would hone in on the fact that this event all stems back to the differencing of religions. Hans Kung focuses greatly on the fact that we as a world and nation need to understand one another's religions and beliefs in order to ever live peacefully among one another.
People are injured. Tonight, the desperate search for clues and a motive. ABC's Alex Marquardt reporting from London takes us inside the attack.
Chaos in the heart of London today. Panicked crowds in the packed streets outside the Palace of Westminster. Tonight, the attack being treated as a terrorist incident that instantly paralyzed Britain's parliament. People fleeing as gunshots ring out. Police shouting at pedestrians to run.
To quote Waldridge, he said, "Globalization is helping to give birth to an economy that is closer to the classic theatrical model of capitalism, under which rational individuals pursue their interests in the light of perfect information, relatively free from government and geographical obstacles. It is also helping to create a society that is closer to the model that liberal politics once imagined, in which power lies increasingly in the hands of individuals rather than governments, and in which people are free, with reasonable bounds, to pursue the good life wherever they find it.
Number 2.
Yeah. This just in, you were looking at obviously a very disturbing live shot there. That is the World Trade Center, and we have unconfirmed reports this morning that a plane has crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center.
This attack was perpetrated by Al-Qaeda, a terrorist organization. This attack has been claimed to be in response to America's backing of Israel, America's involvement in the Persian War, as well as America's continual presence in the Middle East. Huntington claims throughout his article that the main divisions between humankind will be cultural differences. Therefore, Huntington would believe that the most basic cultural differences between the United States and Islamic extremist groups would lead to the 9/11 attack. Huntington would argue that some of these cultural differences are spirituality, religion, female status, language, traditions, and status of leaders. All of these differences between two societies, in turn, have driven this divide between these two, therefore, leading to the Great Division and the harm.
Of Finance.
Sean,
Vice President of Finance for CNN.
The terror attack was claimed by ISIS or ISIL when a man plowed a van into a large crowd on the Promenade des Anglais on Bastille Day. According to John Gray, the idea of having a global free market is one that is very unrealistic and he believes would not work within society today. Gray would possibly blame this conflict on economic globalization occurring in countries such as Iraq, where new technologies are being used to radicalize individuals and encourage them to perform such horrific terror attacks.
The attack appears timed for maximum impact.
Although the Boston Marathon bombing was said to have been carried out independently rather than claimed by a terrorist group, the event was still a terrorist attack. Investigators believe that there may have been some motives that were linked to extremist beliefs, but the actual bombings were carried out on their own. The brothers that carried out the event were said to have learned how to make the explosives on the internet. Friedman probably would have argued that this bombing contributed to the world being flattened. Through knowledge being found out on the internet about the explosives is one way that communication is connecting the world and flattening it. Friedman could have argued as well that the way that the other areas and countries supported those victims of the Boston bombing contributed to the world being flattened as well as to the collaboration and connectivity of the world around us through support of each other.
12 seconds later, as many flee the scene,
just blew up.
a second explosion goes off about 130 yards from the first, less than a block away.
Oh God, get out of the stands.
It was very loud.
The London tube attack happened on a subway system this September. The attack is claimed to have been taken into effect by ISIS. Sen may have argued that the reason that extremists may have carried out this attack is because of their resistance to Western ideas and civilizations. Sen could also have mentioned that Western dominance could have led to the extremists attacking one of the major cities in Great Britain. Advances in technology have given the ability for terrorist attacks to be carried out more often as well as more dangerously.
And I understand most of those to be flash burns.